I have wanted to make a video about bike racks for your vehicle for a long time. Well, today is the day. I've got 4 different bike racks. I'm going to show you which ones are the best, which ones are available, and which one is my favorite. And the contenders are an older rack from Thule, the very popular OneUp, a Hollywood rack, and a brand new brand called Quicker Stuff that is sturdy enough even to hold a 120-pound Sur-Ron. I've actually used all 4 of these racks before, so I'm going to start out with the one that I actually put on my car first. Now, this isn't the highest end rack from Thule, so I did a little research on their other models because I do think for electric bikes, some of them would be even better than this. I have hauled 2 fat bikes on this rack, some without issues and some have some little quirks. This rack slides into the receiver on your vehicle, and then you have this threaded bolt. So you gotta line up the pin. Because the mount here has threads in it, once you tighten this bolt all the way down, you gotta get a wrench or a ratchet and stick it on there. Essentially this cinches this all the way to one side, and that way this doesn't wobble around. So it's actually quite sturdy once you have this tightened down. I'm gonna go grab a wrench. That's not helpful. Here it is. I think in order to be fair for each rack, I need to tighten them all down and show you how much play there either is or isn't once they're actually installed. There we go, that's all tightened down, and now when I wiggle the rack, you can see this does not wobble at all in the receiver. So here's what the Thule looks like in the folded up position. And to put it down, you've got a lever right here. You just pull that up, and then the whole rack rotates down until it pops into place. And then we have these cradles basically to hold the tires. These can be adjusted. You've got kind of a quick release lever, and then these slide back and forth. And then you have this kind of unique pole that swings up. So let's go ahead and throw a bike on there and see how it looks. And one of the disadvantages to this style of rack particularly is that if you are switching between different bikes, these little cradles may not be in the right position. So I may have to move these back and forth a little bit till I get them in the right distance for this particular bike, which is our one-of-a-kind custom Bluebird, which is actually being auctioned off on our website right now. So you can see it's not quite settling in, so whatever bike I had on here previously must have been a touch longer. So if we undo this quick release, we can try and move it. There we go. It's a little hard to move with the bike on, but I think we can get it. There we go. And then we have 2 methods to secure the bike. First, you've got this pole right here with these clamps on it. So there's a button right here to swing this up, and then these clamps swivel around, and then what you have to do is find a spot where you can clamp this to the frame. But it can be a little tricky sometimes with this, getting it into a spot that honestly the bike is happy with. And then we have these plastic straps slip over the wheel, and then you cinch them down tight. They're ratcheting, so those hold nice and tight. And that's how the bike goes on there. And then of course you can put a second bike on this side. Downsides to probably the Thule brand overall is the weight limits. I looked up a bunch of different rack models they had, and some of their most expensive ones, you know, racks that cost $1,000, will fit 2 fat tire bikes. They're advertised for 2 fat tire electric bikes even, but the weight limits on their racks are somewhere between 60 and 65 pounds, which is not a whole lot. If you only have 1 or 2 bikes, it's not so bad, but if I was to throw a different bike on here in the same spot, I'm having to fiddle with all the adjustments and settings on the rack to get it to work. The other thing is I tried putting the Warthog bike on this rack, and it didn't work very well at all, because the only way to secure the upright portion on these is this clamp right here, and the Warthog has a very fat frame that this won't fit over. So although Thule can work for some bikes, the best rack that I could find that they have costs about $900. So for that reason, the Thule bike racks are not one that I would carry because it really wouldn't fit all of the bikes that we have. And you'll see in a moment that some of these other racks are much more user-friendly. For the next one, let's step over to Hollywood racks. Now these holders will actually fit bikes that are not fat bikes as well, so it doesn't have to be a fat bike. This is the Firebird, another one of our custom bikes that's being auctioned off on our website right now, so one lucky person will get this very bike. But according to their website, this rack is rated for 80 pounds for each bike. That is a substantial increase over the Thule racks that will easily cover all of our electric bikes with the batteries removed. It's not going to be heavy duty enough for something like the Saran though. You're going to need something more substantial for that. This particular model from Hollywood Racks is called the Sport Rider. I purchased this one in the 2-inch receiver size, $499, so right at 500 bucks. They're in stock and you can actually buy them right now, which is a huge plus. As of today, we actually have them listed on our website and we will be selling them in our store. And in my mind, there's a couple of improvements over the Thule. One, of course, is the weight I already mentioned. Second is the price. You still have this kind of setup where you have a cradle or a tray that's holding the wheels, and then you have on these, instead of a quick release, it's a little knob that you just loosen up and tighten, and then these slide back and forth to adjust for different bikes. In kind of a similar way as the Thule, if you have just 1 or 2 bikes, you're gonna set this up a certain way, and it's gonna be really easy to put your bikes on and off. However, if you've got multiple bikes of different sizes, it might take you 5 minutes or so to adjust it for a different bike that you're putting on the rack on a particular day. Not a big deal breaker, especially for the price and its capability, just something to be aware of. Now the receiver pin doesn't look like anything fancy. However, the bike has a little trick up its sleeve. So this actually slides in nice and easy, and then there is a lock that goes on the other side so you can lock that pin in place. But you can see this lever right here. If I have this loose, you can see the wobble in the receiver right there. But as I tighten this lever up, that's actually pulling a bar on that pin right there and actually tightening this whole assembly down. So once you've got this tightened down, if I wiggle it again, you can see that very little play between the rack and the receiver. I'm actually moving the whole vehicle. Also similar to the Thule, we have these straps that are ratcheting that you put over the wheels. You've got one for the front wheel, one for the back wheel, and then there's also a bar in the center which folds up and down. But instead of those little clamps that grab onto the frame, these have these little U-shaped hooks here that are padded, and they just cinch down onto the top of the frame. So even on something like the Warthog that's much fatter, it's gonna be, positioned like right here on these points, but it'll still work. So I think the Hollywood rack is a good compromise between capability, price, and availability. Now, in case you're wondering about security, like I mentioned, there is a lock on the receiver pin, so you can't just pull the whole bike rack out. And then for the bikes themselves, these little ratcheting clamps right here have locks on them as well. You are going to be lifting the bike on and off with the rack like this. And finally, if you don't have the bikes on your rack, you pull this spring-loaded pin out right here, and then the whole thing rotates upward, and then that sits it a little bit closer to your vehicle. So Hollywood gets a thumbs up all around, but is it the best or most user-friendly rack? Well, let's see what we got next. This nice looking aluminum rack is from a company called OneUp, and this is the one I've been using on my car for the last few months. I did not have the Hollywood rack in between the Thule and the OneUp, so in my mind, this was like a game changer, because you never know what sort of bike I'm gonna be putting on my car. I never know exactly how heavy it's gonna be. Just for fair comparison, price-wise on any of these racks set up for 2 bikes, fat tires, and a 2-inch receiver, even though that's not what I have here, the Hollywood rack would be $499. A Thule that's actually decent is gonna be much more expensive, but not quite as capable. The OneUp rack is going to be $665, but you have to buy a spacer kit so it works for fat tires. That's gonna bring you up well over $700. Let's see if it's worth it. First off, when you put this rack in, there is no hole for the pin, and it doesn't matter. So you can actually slide this in to wherever it best fits your vehicle. And the way that this tightens up is this ball right here. So when you tighten a bolt on the end of the rack right here, this ball actually comes outward, and so it presses from the inside out and essentially clamps itself inside the receiver, and it's really sturdy. Tool is an Allen head with a hole in it, so it's kind of a security type bolt so not anybody can just walk up with a random tool and pull your rack off. So we stick this in right here until it's nice and firm. So really simple to put on and nice and sturdy and fairly secure. Now if I come to the side, you'll notice that there's two platforms, but they're not at the same height. This is by design and is really clever. What that does is it puts the bike that's closer to the car lower, so when you put the second bike on, the handlebars and everything are going to be slightly above the other bike, so they don't conflict with each other. Very small difference, but it really does make it nice when you're putting two bikes on. Now this rack is designed for two bikes. You can buy adapters that extend these out even further to do 3 bikes, even 4 bikes. But this is the part I love most about this rack, is the magic of putting it on. And for this video, I am going to lift the bike up here, but just so you know, they do make ramps for these. So if you have trouble lifting your bike, you can buy an optional ramp that clips on the end here, and you can roll your bike up onto the platform, which is really nice. So I set the bike on centered with the left and right sides of the car. I tighten one end, tighten the other end, and I'm done. Now you can see I didn't quite have the rack set up for the right bike. There are these spacers right here, and there's different holes along the sides, so you can move these in and out for different bikes. So really these should be on a little bit tighter. Let me throw it on the back one just so you can see the proper fit. And that's more like it. So with that, you can see how easy it is to put the bike on. The length of the bike doesn't really matter because these can ratchet in closer, further. If we have a different wheel size, you just need a single wrench to remove these and change them to a different position. But you can see how quick and easy it is to put this bike on. One disadvantage to this style of rack is that these sometimes might interfere with fenders you have on your bike. So you might have to be a little creative, get this to squeak under the fender. Maybe you've got a piece of foam or something you can put over the fender. I've seen some people loosen the fenders so that they kind of have a little more flex so they can get out of the way till they tighten the rack down. The plus side is, if you look closely at the bike, where is the rack touching the frame? Well, the answer is nowhere. The only place this rack touches the bike is on the tires, so you're never going to scratch up your nice, beautiful frame. Once again, this is the Bluebird. I really like the OneUp Rack. At the end of the day, does the Hollywood Rack get your bike to your destination safely? Yes, absolutely. The OneUp in some ways is just a lot more user-friendly, but you gotta spend a little bit more for it. Now, if you really want the best rack that exists, is the OneUp the best? Well, it turns out the guy who designed this rack went and started another company and has something even better. But a couple more things before I move on that I need to show you. This ratcheting system works quite well. Sometimes if you really tighten these down on your tires, it can be a little hard to get this little lever to loosen off of these little ridges right here. If there's not a bike in, they go really easy. Now to fold the rack up, you pull on this lever here so it can be tight up against your vehicle. Just make sure you're not blocking your plates or taillights. It can also go down the opposite way. So if you need to get into your trunk with bikes on, you can tilt the bikes down, grab our tool and take the bike rack off. And now it's time for the rack from Quicker Stuff. And this, I think, is going to blow your mind. Now, I didn't mention it earlier, but assembly time when you first receive the rack is something you should be aware of. Not a huge selling point for me on some of these racks because it's something you only have to do once. The Hollywood rack will probably take you 20-30 minutes to assemble when you first pull it out of the box, but you never have to do it again. And of course, if you buy it from us in store, we'd be happy to put it together for you. The first thing I saw when I pulled the Quicker Stuff rack out of the box is that there was absolutely zero assembly required, which I did not expect. It shows up in a box like this. Now, unfortunately, I only have the single rack version because I didn't know how good it was gonna be. And in hindsight, I should have ordered the adapter to put a second bike on. These have add-ons so you can buy a rack for a single bike. You can make it work for 2 bikes, 3 bikes, or even up to 4 bikes. So I will definitely be ordering some add-ons. The downside is, and I'm gonna mention this up front, this rack is the most expensive out of everything I've just showed you, and it has the longest lead time. It took me at least 6 months to receive this rack because they are completely bogged down with orders, which after receiving it, I can see why. It is really an awesome design. It is my favorite, but again, it's the most expensive and you have to wait a long time to get one. So the rack comes out of the box like this. First thing to do is unfold it. You just twist these out until they lock into place. Now the rack is ready to put on the car. Now, similar to the OneUp, it is clamping from the inside, but there's a couple of changes. Instead of a single steel ball, they're using these 2 aluminum pads, which they say will be better for the longevity of your receiver and won't make like a round wear point. It also has this little quick release pin right here. This doesn't need to go into the hole of your receiver, it can, but as long as it's behind this little ridge right here, it's just an extra safety mechanism. So we pull this pin, slide it past, and then from there, we don't need any tools to tighten this down. We just tighten this lever around. They recommend that wherever you tighten to, leave it in the top half of its rotation. That way, in case you hit a speed bump or something low, that you're not going to hit this lever on the ground. Now it's tightened all the way down. If you want to lock the receiver to the car, you just push this pin in, and now it's locked. The only tool, if there is one, is this key to unlock this from the receiver. If you want to tilt the rack up, you pull this right here, and it tilts up to different positions. Or if you want to tilt the bikes down, you can still do that. Sometimes it's a struggle to pull this little lever right here and get that mechanism to work. So far, this one has been really easy. The Quicker Stuff rack also has a ramp option if you don't want to lift your bike. Now, similar to the OneUp, you have this holder that slides up. However, there are no ridges on this. They got rid of them. So this is just a smooth piece. All you have to do is make sure this red lever is parallel with this bar and it slides easily. And you might be thinking, well, how does that actually hold the bike? Well, if you watch, I can move it this way easily to tighten down onto the tire. But if I try and pull back, it grabs and it only moves one direction. So it actually works quite well. So I put the bike on, keeping it centered with the car, tighten these up, and we're done. Again, only touching the tires on the bike. It's not going to scratch the frame anywhere with this style of rack. Super easy to use, and it's really sturdy. If you go for the version that is designed for a 2-inch receiver, the rack is rated for 120 pounds per bike, which means that you could actually put 2 Surons on there with batteries. Now, I still think it's a good idea to remove the batteries for weight. That's just gonna help the longevity of all your parts and pieces, but the fact that it can do it is pretty amazing. On the OneUp rack, I had one of the holders set to the wrong size for moving a different bike. On this one, however, you don't even need a tool for that either. You've got a lever right here. You can loosen this up, and then this piece slides up and down in this track. So you can actually adjust this to quite a few different wheel sizes without any tools at all. Now, if you need to go even smaller than that, you can move it down to this lower hole and go really tiny with it. But even for that, again, you don't need a tool. It's already all built in. So the fact that I can throw basically any e-bike we have on this rack without any tools, and even remove the rack without any tools, makes this an absolute winner. But again, there is the cost. 2-inch receiver version for 2 bikes is gonna cost right around $1,000. So it is literally double the price of the Hollywood rack, and you're gonna have to wait right now about 6 months to even get one. So if you need a rack that's gonna do the job, Hollywood is gonna get the job done. This one I think is worth waiting for. So it just depends on what your needs are and how much money do you want to spend. And don't forget, this is the Bluebird. This is a custom one-off bike that we refurbished out of parts. This is for sale right now on our website. It is being auctioned off. And also we have the Area 13 Firebird on auction as well. I hope this video helps you choose a bike rack that's gonna fit for your needs. And now that you know everything you need to know about these 4 particular bike racks, I have some information about hydraulic brakes for e-bikes that might be of interest too. Thanks again for watching. Hit that subscribe button.